Okay, so hi there. We've got another set of essays from you. Wow, that's great. Your turnaround time is really, really good, exactly what it should be. This is the best way to make sure that you are applying everything you're learning and really just keeping up your momentum. So well done. This is the one about technology and whether it makes us more social. So let's see what you said. Experts throughout the world have debated whether the advent of technology has transformed man to become more sociable or otherwise. All right, my issue with this sentence is the word transformed. We usually say transform somebody or something into something else, so it's not the best word here. You could have chosen a bunch of different words. You could have said compelled, impelled, has forced, has encouraged, any of these other words that can be used with to. But transformed is usually used in a different way. So you could have said, if you really absolutely want to use transform, you could have said something like, the advent of technology has transformed man into a more social being. Okay, you could have said it like that, and then or not. So then the sentence would read, experts throughout the world have debated whether the advent of technology has transformed man into a more social being or not. Okay? Some believe that technology encourages interaction between individuals. Here you need a however, you need some sort of contrast because you've got two opposing ideas in one sentence, and just having a comma there is not enough. So you most certainly need to add a linker that shows some sort of contrast. So however is one of my favorites, or else you could have used yet. Okay? So this essay will argue that technology is not an effective medium to foster human relationships, plural, using examples from the Swedish Department of Sociology and Oxford University, capital U, to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Okay, fine. On the one hand, there is ample evidence that technology has made, because we don't know when this happened, has made communication easier compared to the past, but did not help humans, plural, to open up to each other. The central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, man perceives that face-to-face interaction and social gestures, such as hugging, are important. Now, why is it are? Because you have two things here, and the second one, in fact, is plural, so you absolutely have to use are. So are important in a relationship. Secondly, okay, the act of kindness between individuals is essential in enhancing mutual understanding, singular. For example, recent empirical research by the Swedish Department of Sociology demonstrated that 90% of all Swedish people have been actively using Skype to communicate with their business partners globally, but refrained from using it to foster new friendships. In fact, WhatsApp group dedicated for residents in Oslo suburbs failed to encourage the residents to mingle. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that although technology has made communication simpler, careful, it's just simpler, this does not translate to men becoming more sociable. All right, you don't want to say men here because then it sounds like you're exclusively talking about just males. Just people would have been fine. Now, let me tell you what my issue was with this paragraph. It's the way you organize it a little bit. You left this one about people regarding hugging and social gestures as important. You left it completely unsupported. So you just said it and then you moved on to your second idea and then you supported that really extensively. I don't want you to do that. I really want to encourage you that every time you have some sort of a main idea, which is what these are, when you say the central reason is this firstly and then secondly, each of those are your main ideas and they each have to be supported. And the best way to do this really is to support it directly after whatever you say. So while you did a nice job of supporting this whole thing about mutual understanding and active kindness, you didn't do anything about this. And so you really needed to support this with some sort of examples and illustrations and so forth. Okay, and then of course there's some little grammar things happening consistently. They're not really terrible, but there are some things that will keep you from getting one of those higher band scores because they are happening frequently enough to to cause some idea that it's not really very accurate. Okay, let's move on to your next paragraph though. On the other hand, although the advent of communicative applications does not appear to be beneficial to humans, in becoming more receptible. This is the wrong spelling. I don't know what it means, quite frankly. The impact of technology cannot be overstated. You don't need all these commas. It's not the impact of technology, comma. Just get rid of it. You don't need it here. This is largely because online interactive games have, okay, games plural, have successfully gathered groups of people and have, again, become a platform for people to connect with each other from a common point of interest. For example, an extensive study by Oxford University showed that introverted Japanese who isolated themselves from society for years started to not know, but get to know or learn or make, is actually the best word, started to make new friends through online interactive games such as Counter-Strike. Thus, it's possible to state beyond doubt that innovative technologies at times build relationships. Okay, I'm happy with this paragraph. I think you did a nice job of supporting it, of arguing your position and saying that, in fact, yes, it can make us more social because it allows us to connect with one another. Let's see, become a platform for people to connect, common point of interest. So all that was fine. That's good. Okay, let's look at your conclusion. So from the argument examples given, I firmly believe that technology will distance human relationships and lead them to become more isolated and introverted. It is predicted that technology will advance further. Applications will make communication more convenient. Paradoxically, distancing, ing. Okay, you needed a comma here and then distancing. All right, now that's fine if that's how you feel. However, let's see. What I want you to do is I want you to reverse the order of your paragraphs. Essentially, the paragraph that you support should come second. It should come after your, how can I say this? So basically, it should be your introduction, then it should be your concession paragraph where you analyze the opposite point of view, even though essentially you don't agree with it, or you don't support it as highly. And then the second body paragraph should be the side that you support. This way it makes it feel more weighted. It gives it more, it acts more like an anchor to really give your opinion more weight. It's the last thing that the reader reads, and so it makes it also more memorable in the mind of the reader. This is the correct order of paragraphs, okay? So please reverse those paragraphs, because I had forgotten what you wrote in your introduction. I was rather surprised to see this. So that's one thing I want you to change, okay? It's a nice essay. It's got some things that you need to correct, but on the whole, you're definitely on the right track. You're doing well. So keep at it and just correct some of these things that we've discussed in this video correction. Okay, let's look at your task one, your first task one, about shoes. Okay, so here's what you wrote. The bar chart illustrates the sales of black and brown leather shoes in 9 European countries in 2018. Overall, Hungary emerged with the highest sales amongst all European countries, irrespective of black or brown leather shoes. Okay, fine. Conversely, brown leather shoes were sold least in Belgium, whilst France sold the lowest quality of black leather shoes. Okay, so what we're missing here is which countries sold the highest brown leather shoes, which is not a big deal. So fine, let's move on. Generally, consumers, you mean consumers with an S, in 3 countries, namely Hungary, Italy, and the UK, had preferred black over brown leather shoes, but with minimum discrepancy of less than 50,000 shoes. All right, I don't really understand what that means, but let's continue on to see if maybe you explain it a little better. In addition, Belgium showed a clear predilection of black over brown shoes, recording ing here. Approximately 125,000 black shoes compared to merely 5,000 brown shoe sales, no S, with a vast 120,000 difference. Okay, you didn't need to do that math for us. On the other hand, the other 5 countries, France, Germany, Ireland, Holland, and Poland, you keep using past perfect here. It's not necessary. Had shown a better performance in brown versus black sales. Discrepancy, this is awkward, discrepancy. In sales, no. How about this? The difference in sales of brown and black leather shoes were twofold, but that still doesn't make sense. You could say there was a twofold difference between brown and black leather shoes in Poland. and a threefold difference in France. But I wouldn't even really explain it like this. It just sounds a little awkward. It's certainly not a particularly natural kind of expression. So how else could you have said it? You want to talk about the difference between brown and black in Poland. Let's see. You could have just said that brown leather shoes, there were twice as many brown leather shoes sold in Poland as black leather shoes. And in France, the difference between brown and black leather shoes was threefold. That's it. Okay? So that's probably the most natural way to say this. All right. One of the things I want to make sure here is that you've included all the countries. The brown and black leather shoes clearly are some of your key information, but the other key information here is, in fact, the countries themselves. So it's absolutely necessary for you to at least mention once each country. So let's see here. You've got you've got Belgium, France, Hungary, Italy, UK, and then you've said Belgium before, and then we've got Germany, Ireland, Holland, and Poland. So it looks like you mentioned all of them. So that's good. You have an overview, which is also important. You cannot get a 6 without an overview, and your overview was fine. What I wasn't really super thrilled with was this paragraph. I felt like you really tried to get too many things in that paragraph. You're over the 150 word count, but I felt like, yeah, it was 158 words. So I think what you could have done is I think you could have split these paragraphs, and I think you could have said a little more. I don't want you to worry about the word count as long as you're over 150 words. So you started talking about black leather shoes, all right? And you basically started talking about black compared to brown in 3 countries, and then again, black over brown. So what you did is you kind of talked about both shoes together, which was a little awkward. I mean, I felt like I wasn't really getting a clear picture of this. So I think one of the things that you could have done here, and there were a handful of things, there were a bunch of ways you could have done this. Generally, it's a good idea to divide the detail paragraphs into 2. Okay, just keep that as a rule of thumb. Now, there are a handful of ways you could have done this. You could have, number 1, talked about black leather shoes in one paragraph and brown leather shoes in another paragraph. Okay, that's the first possibility. The second thing you could have done is you could have talked about the countries where black leather shoes were higher, and then another paragraph talking about where brown leather shoes were higher. Okay, but again, splitting these and having a clear distinction between the paragraphs. I felt like your paragraph was a little kind of confusing. And while you do have data, now keep in mind here you had 18 pieces of data. What did you actually provide us? You gave us 1, 2, this is really, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So not really a ton. I'm not saying you had to include 18 pieces of data. No, heaven forbid, absolutely not. But I think you could have given us a little more. I think you probably should have. So those are a couple of suggestions on how you could have organized this, on what you could have done, and what you could have included. And there are a ton of ways you could have done this. Now, one of the ways I personally like this, I think it makes it really clear, is to talk about, the way I said it before, black in one paragraph, brown in another paragraph, and then, of course, using these here, these numbers along the side to group information together. So one thing I would personally do is if I were going to talk about the black leather shoes, I would talk about the 3 countries, Hungary, Italy, and Belgium, seeing that they were all between 100 and 150,000. I would talk about France, saying that's the only country that had less than 50,000 sales. And then the rest of these countries, it's another 5. I would group them all together, saying that they all sold between 50 and 100,000 shoes. Black leather shoes, of course, okay? Then I would do something very similar for the brown leather shoes. I would start off talking about the 4 countries, and I would even contrast that. I would say, even though the numbers were a little lower than those of black leather shoes, 4 countries rather than 3 had sales of brown leather shoes between 100 and 150,000. Slightly below this, between 50 and 100,000, were X, Y, Z, and A, whatever, and okay, just those. And then I would lastly talk about Belgium. So that's the way I would talk about this. I think it's clear. I think it gives somebody the visual of what it looks like and gives people enough information without bogging them down with too much information. Okay, so keep that in mind. I know it's your first task one. I hope that gives you some sorts of ideas on how to organize your answers in the future. So think about it and go ahead and correct these, and let's see more work from you.